The Carney Cabinet's rocky debut. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
The top news stories
and conversations that matter to you.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
The premiere of Prime Minister Mark Carney's new cabinet isn't getting rave reviews. Remarks by some cabinet ministers, both before and after their first cabinet meeting, are making news headlines today, and not necessarily for good reasons. For example, Steven Guilbeault isn't the environment minister anymore. He's the new Minister of Culture and Identity. But when he was cornered by a member of the Parliamentary Press Gallery, he was nevertheless asked for his opinion on the growing support for a pipeline, east-west. Guilbeault, the former Greenpeace environmental protester who once climbed onto the roof of Ralph Klein's house, made false claims about pipeline capacity in Canada and gave the cold shoulder to any idea of a new pipeline going from Alberta to Atlantic Canada.
So on pipelines, people should remember that we bought a pipeline, Trans Mountain, and that is only used right now about 40% capacity. So I think before we start talking about building an entire new pipeline, maybe we should maximize the use of existing infrastructure. And the Canadian Energy Regulator, as well as the International Energy Agency, are telling us that probably by 2028, 2029, demand for oil will peak globally, and it will also peak in Canada. So as far as I know, there are no investors right now. There are no companies that are saying that they want to build an east-west pipeline. And as you know, these things are built by companies, not governments.
The Trans Mountain Pipeline project was nationalized by the Trudeau government, but only after the original developer abandoned the project, citing interprovincial disagreements. The original cost of the project was to be $8 billion. It ended up costing taxpayers more than $35 billion and was years behind schedule. And Mr. Guilbeault's claims that the pipeline is only at 40% capacity, they're not true. Total utilization of that pipeline was 77%, as per the most recent update. Mr. Guilbeault's remarks also contradict comments made by Prime Minister Carney, who has said pipelines can be built if there's a consensus. On pipelines, there was more of a conciliatory tone struck by one of the new faces around the council table, Tim Hodgson. He comes from the banking sector. He's the new Minister of Energy, and Natural Resources. He also has ties to the oil sands. He was on the board of directors of an oil sands company.
We look forward to building, and I look forward to digging in. We have a lot to do. I look forward to working with my provincial and territorial counterparts, our Indigenous partners, our industrial partners, and other stakeholders to build a more prosperous, secure, and safe Canada. And I will be going out west very soon.
Aside from the future of pipelines, there's the housing file. Prime Minister Carney has vowed to build new housing units at a record pace of 500,000 units per year. And he has tapped the former mayor of Vancouver to get the job done, Gregor Robertson. But critics point out that during Gregor Robertson's time as mayor of Vancouver, Vancouver's housing market became the most expensive housing market in Canada. And Robertson didn't help himself when he was asked if housing prices needed to come down, and he said no.
Housing prices in Vancouver went up while you were mayor. I want to ask you, why do you feel like you have the skills necessary to do this when you saw a 179% increase in Vancouver housing prices?
Yeah, we've seen increases like that across Canada over the past decade. Certainly since my time as mayor, we've seen a lot more movement here in Ottawa, and we've got great programs starting to work now. A Housing Accelerator program is partnering with cities to deliver. I'm here to leverage my history as a mayor. I know what works on the ground. I wasn't getting the help I needed from the federal government when I was mayor, or the provincial government of all stripes. We need, as a government in Ottawa, to be delivering and partnering with cities and provinces all together, and making sure we're building enough supply, and that the federal government is focused on affordable housing and delivering that. No, I think that we need to deliver more supply, make sure the market is stable. It's a huge part of our economy. But we need to be delivering more affordable housing. And the government of Canada has not been building affordable housing since the 90s, and we've created a huge shortage across Canada. That's where the big need is right now.
His remark that housing prices don't need to come down quickly went viral on social media. Robertson then spent most of yesterday evening trying to explain what he really meant. After the first cabinet meeting, there was some more big news. The Carney government has no plan to table a federal budget this year. It will instead issue a fall economic update. The new Minister of Finance dropped that bombshell, François-Philippe Champagne.
Will you table a budget before summer?
So what we have today is a middle-class tax cut. That's step one. Step two, you're going to have a throne speech which will outline the Canadian government priority, and there will be a fall economic statement to follow. So those are really the sequence that you're going to see. Tax cut for the middle class, we're going to be introducing a Ways and Means motions as we enter back into Parliament. We'll table legislation. Then there'll be a throne speech, and then we'll present a fall economic statement.
Opposition leaders were not happy with that news. You'll hear from Conservative Party leader Pierre Poilievre in a few minutes from now. The interim leader of the New Democrats, Don Davies, said, quote, "It's Parliament's most basic function. To authorize and scrutinize spending, we need an economic plan tabled in the House of Commons in June. But there will be a tax cut, as the Liberals promised during the election campaign." Prime Minister Carney allowed the cameras into his cabinet meeting for about a minute and a half, during which time he did a Trump-style signing of an executive order.
We promised a middle-class tax cut, leading to over $800 of savings for two-income households. We're acting today on that so that by July 1st, as promised, that middle-class tax cut that will reduce taxes for the 22 million Canadians who pay federal income taxes, that tax cut will take into effect. We're acting on affordability as we look to build out this economy. It's my pleasure on behalf of the Cabinet to sign this order to deliver that tax cut et respecter nos engagements, notre engagement pour les Canadiens et les Canadiennes. Thank you very much.
There's really no such thing as executive orders. In Canada, signed by a prime minister, there are what's known as orders in council, but they're signed by the governor general, not the prime minister. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
You have questions.
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
On News Radio.
Well, with the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, not having a seat in the House of Commons, Poilievre was holding court with the news media outside the House on the grounds of Parliament Hill today. He just wrapped up some remarks within the last hour or so. We learned yesterday that the Carney government is not going to present a budget this spring, as is usually the case. The Minister of Finance, François-Philippe Champagne, said yesterday there won't be a federal budget, but rather a fall economic update, of course, later this year. But that's not good enough for Pierre Poilievre. He called on the government to draft a budget so Canadians can see the government's plan.
Mr. Carney said during the election campaign that he had a plan. And he took great delight in saying that a slogan is not a plan. Well, a budget is a plan. And if he does indeed have a plan, if he does know what he's doing, then he would introduce a budget so that Canadians know exactly what the finances are. We were very disappointed yesterday to hear that he has no budget plan for this year. This makes it the longest period without a budget since the 60s, the first time there has not been a budget outside of COVID in over 20 years. Extremely unusual. It'll send a bad signal to investors and ratings agencies, and a lot of people will wonder what the Liberal government is hiding about our finances.
So does that mean the Conservatives wouldn't support the Liberals' plan to cut income taxes, which will happen this spring? It will be part of legislation, a Ways and Means motion, when Parliament resumes. Poilievre wouldn't say.
Right now the plan is to have a 1% reduction of the lowest marginal tax rate, not too different from what the Conservatives are proposing on the election campaign. Well, if that is what is proposed and is what goes on paper in the Ways and Means motion, would the Conservatives support that, yes or no?
I never answer questions that start with if. We'll see what they do. But we support tax cuts. We are the party of tax cuts. And I've been talking about income tax cuts for years now. Our proposal was a 15% income tax cut for the average worker and senior that would save a couple up to $2,000. And we think that is the right way to go. But we'll always work with other parties to cut taxes for Canadians because we believe that a dollar left in the hands of the person who earned it, including all of you, is better than a dollar in the hands of the politician or bureaucrat who taxed it.
Poilievre was then asked about comments yesterday from the former Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault, who questioned the need for an east-west pipeline. Poilievre called Stephen Guilbeault a threat to national unity. He also added he's not impressed with some of the other members of this new cabinet as well.
Yes, he is. Absolutely. I mean, I just find it astonishing that Mr. Carney would appoint a man who says we don't need any pipelines built. The Liberals went around the country pretending they had changed their minds about pipelines after 10 years of blocking them. But now one of Mr. Carney's top ministers comes out and says we don't need any more pipelines and that he would work to block those pipelines. He wants to block road construction. He's against nuclear power. He's against all forms of economic development. And that will be bad for the entire country, to be clear, but especially antagonistic to the resource-producing provinces like Saskatchewan and Alberta, who rightly feel that they have been mistreated by this lost Liberal decade. So what we see, we have Mr. Guilbeault, who wants to block resource development. We have Sean Fraser, who created the immigration crisis and then the housing crisis. A new housing minister yesterday who says he doesn't want housing costs to go down. Presumably he wants them to go up like they did when he nearly tripled them as mayor of Vancouver. So what we're seeing is that in the last 48 hours of this Liberal government is looking a lot like the last 10 years.
That's the Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre, within the last hour or so, speaking outside of the House of Commons, something he'll have to get used to from now on. After losing his own riding on election night, he was speaking on the grounds of Parliament Hill. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
Here with David Smith, and if you're ever looking for a podcast of our show, Now You Know with Rob Snow, we have a great new mobile app that will help you hear our show when you want to. Listen live, listen to the podcast. It is called the Seeker app, spelled Seekr, and it has all kinds of exclusive audio that you won't hear anywhere else, news, music, and sports. You can download it for iOS or Android. It's Seeker, spelled Seekr. And Now You Know with Rob Snow is also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And David, the dust is still settling on the federal election.
Yeah.
The riding of Terrebonne, we have talked about this kind of suburban Montreal, off-island Montreal riding, has been filled with drama because initially it looked like the Liberals won a really close race on election night in that riding. And then it flipped back to the Bloc, right? After the results were validated, and then they had a judicial recount, and then it flipped back to the Liberals. But the thing is, it flipped back to the Liberals by one vote, by one single vote. David, can you imagine losing an election by one vote? How disappointing that would be. And yesterday, Elections Canada said that that result is final, despite news reports and a woman coming forward saying, look, I sent my vote in to Elections Canada by mail, a special ballot, and I voted for the Bloc. I voted for the Bloc candidate in my riding. Her ballot was returned to her, and it was Elections Canada. It was its mistake. There was a misprint on the envelope. But nevertheless, despite the error, Elections Canada said yesterday this riding is over and these results are final. Well, as you can imagine, that's not sitting too well with the leader of the Bloc Québécois, Yves-François Blanchet. He was back in Ottawa this morning, and he was in Ottawa alongside his defeated candidate in this riding of Terrebonne. Nathalie Sinclair Desgagne is her name. And it's not over, according to Mr. Blanchet. They're going to court. Let's listen to this.
The situation is quite clear. The judge has established that the Bloc Québécois would have lost the riding by 1 vote. The vote appeared in the hands of a citizen in a very clear fashion, and in that situation, the law requires the election to be done all over again in the riding of Terrebonne. This is what we expect. But since, I don't know what's the name in English of Élections Canada, but since they cannot by themselves ask for the election to be repeated, we have to bring this situation in front of a judge in a court in order to do the election all over again.
Do you think that sets a precedent that you won't accept official election results from Elections Canada and you're not willing to listen to the vote of the people when your party doesn't win?
I'm not getting into that. I'm sorry to rain on the spectacular parade, but this is not my mindset. There's a law. It appears clear. We have a case. We go forward because we want this election to be held properly, and that's it.
The leader of the Bloc Québécois, Yves-François Blanchet, who says his party will fight this announcement that the election results in the riding of Terrebonne are final. He's going to fight that in court. Now, David, another twist to this story. The person who originally came forward and said, I mailed in my ballot lots of time, and Canada Post screwed up, and they didn't count my vote, and they sent it back to me, and I was going to vote for the Bloc. That may not be the only case, apparently, according to a news report.
Yeah, according to a report from the Quebec outlet Nouveau Info this morning, they asked Elections Canada. Good question. Glad they asked. Reading from the report here, Elections Canada confirmed earlier Thursday that 5 more votes could not be counted in the riding of Terrebonne due to a delay that may have been related to the labeling of envelopes. Quote, 5 ballots were received, but late, at the local office, despite the fact that the return envelope contained an error in the postal code, end quote, Elections Canada told Nouveau Info. So Elections Canada says there are, I guess, at least 5 more of these votes that we know about, according to this report. But the Chief Electoral Officer of Canada says they don't have the authority to trigger a redo of this election. They have to go through the courts. And reporters had many questions for Mr. Blanchet about what his rationale is for why he believes the party has the legal standing to ask for this judicial challenge at this point. So that's also an open-ended question. We'll follow that for some more reporting about whether or not the Bloc has the legal ground to stand on here. So lots really still to come on that story.
Okay. We'll be right back with our Newsday panel coming up on News Radio.
The Newsday panel.
Well, it's going to be a killer Newsday panel today. 2 of my faves are on today. Don't tell the others. It's time for the Newsday panel with Tim Powers, chair of Summa Strategies. How are you?
Well, I'm feeling better. Are you feeling better? Other guests whose name I can't say yet to Rob.
Cam Holmstrom is here, the pride of Kenora and principal at Neboy Strategies. How are you, Cam?
I'm feeling great now.
Well, that's good.
Special. I appreciate it, Rob. That made my
week. All right. That's good.
Never happens for either of us,
I
Rob.
am a unifier
of
people.
Good.
I like to bring people together. The country needs unity right now, and that's what I'm doing here. Look, what do you think? Just some general opening remarks, because I thought it was a gong show yesterday. That's my own opinion. But what did you think, Cam, of the debut of some of Mark Carney's new cabinet ministers?
Well, you know what? When I saw that Stephen Guilbeault had gotten back in the cabinet, I'm like, either this man's learned something or Mark Carney, you're about to learn a lesson the hard way. And well, it sure did turn out to be the latter, didn't it? Like, I'm surprised if anyone was surprised that Stephen Guilbeault did what he did yesterday. Honestly, if you spent 5 seconds watching the guy operate, you knew this is what he was going to do, which is why he should not have been put back into cabinet. Now, to me, if you're Mr. Carney, you got to slap him down, because you know what? That answer he gave, he knew what he did. The fact that you could say, you know what? You've got facts that say, great, there are only 40. We built this new pipeline. There's only 40% capacity being used, and maybe we should worry about that first. But you
which
know
is not
that's
wrong.
not the
Which
point.
is wrong. Which is wrong. It's not even true what he said. It's not even true what he said.
But still, the bigger point of the matter is just throwing salt in a wound. And again, it's not even your portfolio. What he should have been saying, which most cabinet ministers who are professional, what he should have said was, "It's not my portfolio.
Not my portfolio." Why don't you go to the environment minister and ask them about that, or go to the natural resources minister? Yeah, let's listen to that again, Mr. Guilbeault from yesterday.
You think prices need to go down?
No, pipeline.
On pipelines, people should remember that we bought a pipeline, Trans Mountain, and that is only used right now about 40% capacity. So I think before we start talking about building an entire new pipeline, maybe we should maximize the use of existing infrastructure. And the Canadian Energy Regulator, as well as the International Energy Agency, are telling us that probably by 2028, 2029, demand for oil will peak globally, and it will also peak in Canada. So as far as I know, there are no investors right now. There are no companies that are saying that they want to build an east-west pipeline. And as you know, these things are built by companies, not governments.
Well, some of them are built by governments if the companies leave. But
and Rob, the other piece.
Okay, very quickly.
Big point here. The whole reason we're talking east-west now is because of our relationship with the Americans. Guess what? We don't have that capacity going east-west, which is now a national security issue.
Well, I would also point out,
going past the point.
The Premier of Quebec did an interview with a well-known podcaster in Quebec. There's a big write-up about it in Journal de Montréal right now. Even Francois Legault says, "Yeah, we'll probably have to have a pipeline that goes through Quebec, and it should go to Sept-Îles. Sept-Îles would be a good place for it." I mean, that's the tone is shifting even in that province where he's from. Tim, I have a couple of more questions that I want to ask Tim about this, but just on what Mr. Guilbeault did yesterday, what are your comments on that? Because it really kind of took over the whole day.
His history, right? He cannot get rid of his history. And he has tried to resist all forms of development. You will remember, both will remember, the government, federal government did, under Trudeau, support Beta Nord, and by all reports, which is a big project for us in Newfoundland and Labrador, that he was resistant to all of that. I think he feels at his core he's got to stay true to his environmental history, which is fine, but don't be a cabinet minister then. Do that. Find another way to do that. I think what I took away from yesterday is, look, I will give Mark Carney credit for trying to say, let's go out and operate and everybody will have a voice. The challenge with that is you get, none of what happened yesterday is going to be fatal to the Prime Minister, but it's an important lesson to learn from. I have to tell you, Rob and Cam, the one I really appreciated, because I like him, is Wayne Long from St. John, New Brunswick. And Wayne is now our revenue minister, CRA, and Wayne was out there saying, yeah, we're going to act like a corporation. Well, I'm thinking, Wayne, probably not the word to choose, but if you are, can you fire all those extra auditors that we hired at $500 million a year who are making grannies' lives across the country?
You mentioned Beta Nord, right? Which was, I don't know what the future is for that whole thing. But the offshore industry for Newfoundland has been very good for Newfoundland. It's created a lot of opportunity. It's created a lot of jobs. It's created a lot of wealth. I just wonder, you do talk radio from time to time in at a St. John's
every day, Rob, every day.
Oh, really? Is it every day? Is it every day now? Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. I'm just wondering because I take a lot of calls from Alberta, and a couple of weeks ago I was saying, what can Mark Carney do to prove that he's different from Justin Trudeau? And the most popular choice was dump Stephen Guilbeault. I am just wondering if people in Newfoundland and Labrador have the same kind of sentiment to this particular cabinet minister, Tim? What's your sense of that?
And yes, but not to this. They're not as attuned to him per se. What they are fixated on in Newfoundland and Labrador is what the Albertans and Saskatchewanians are, C-69. That is the big target on the East Coast as well. Guilbeault hardly steps foot in Newfoundland, and that's deliberately by design, I think, in the case of Justin Trudeau, because he may have ended up on a wharf and then became an anchor.
Okay. We'll be right back. I want to talk about Gregor Robertson as well. No, housing prices don't need to come down. No. Okay, housing minister. The former mayor of Vancouver, Gregor Robertson, is the new minister of housing, and this is what he was asked by a news reporter yesterday about housing prices.
Vancouver prices need to go down. No, I think that we need to deliver more supply, make sure the market is stable. It's a huge part of our economy. We need to be delivering more affordable housing. The government of Canada has not been building affordable housing since the 90s, and we've created a huge shortage across Canada. That's where the big need is right now.
That's good, David. I mean, the key part of that is that housing minister is asked, do housing prices need to come down? And he said no. Which for anyone under the age of 40 is like the dumbest thing to ever say. And yet he said it, and he's the housing minister, and I wonder if he regrets saying that and whether he wants a mulligan. What do you think, Tim Powers?
I can't imagine that he doesn't want a mulligan. I mean, look, there's a difference between being a mayor and a federal cabinet minister, as he's discovering. And, you know, as a mayor, he maybe could have explained that away a little bit. But when you're the minister of housing and your first statement is you don't have an issue with housing prices, you probably might want to think about going back to being mayor. Look, I say, Rob, you and I, radio people, we all want these guys to talk and everybody in cabinet to talk. But they're going to need some coaching on how to answer and think about what they're saying and frame their stories, because they didn't help their boss on their first day of being mass exposed to the public.
Caucus discipline, cabinet discipline, message discipline comes to mind. What do you think, Cam Holmstrom?
Well, a couple of things. First off, you think the guy who had been the mayor of Vancouver, of all places, which is consistently in the top 5 of the most expensive places to live on the entire planet, would understand that, you know what, maybe housing prices need to come down in some places, right? Like, you figure he of all people would get it, but again, he said what he said. All I'll say is this, is that, you know, there are certain times when you're on a team and you have a teammate who jumps to another team or the other side, and you're kind of happy to see them go, and you're like, you know what, that's addition by subtraction for us. That's how a lot of New Democrats feel about Gregor Robertson. Let's just put it that way. And that's prime example A as to why I don't think a lot of people on the Orange team were that upset to see him jump over to the Red team. That being said, I think for Mr. Guilbeault and for Mr. Robertson, if Mr. Carney is going to be different and he's going to be serious about it, he's got to put the clamps down on these guys fast and let them know there will not be a second mistake like this. And he has to put the gears to them quickly, because if he allows this kind of stuff to happen, it may not hurt the first time, but if it keeps happening, it will hurt, and something bad will come of it.
Yeah. Okay. Now, speaking of the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney. Okay, so the cameras are allowed into the cabinet meeting, and he's sitting there, and he's got the Trump-style folder, and I'm going to sign this order, middle-class tax cut. Let's roll the tape on this again.
He promised a middle-class tax cut, leading to over $800 of savings for two-income households. We're acting today on that so that by July 1st, as promised, that middle-class tax cut that will reduce taxes for the 22 million Canadians who pay federal income taxes, that tax cut will take into effect. We're acting on affordability as we look to build out this economy. It's my pleasure on behalf of the Cabinet to sign this order to deliver that tax cut et respecter nos engagements.
Like all that is missing in this, is like Howard Lutnick in the background or Stephen Miller or somebody like that from the Trump administration. Okay? This is not how it works in Canada. I mean, this was a political candidate who said the other guy's so Trumpy. He's so Trumpy. He worships at the Trump altar. This guy, Mark Carney, with all due respect, is stealing his material with this. He did it with the carbon tax, and now he's done it with this middle class tax. We don't do it like this in our system. Sign fake executive orders. What did you think about that, Tim? I thought it's silly looking.
I thought the first one was clever as a stunt, but I think going back there a second time was not wise because, Rob, it reflects the commentary you just said. If your whole approach is collaboration and engagement, well, yep, people are going to want that tax cut. There's no doubt about it. This tax cut that the order was signed for. Then just bring it to Parliament. I know he wants to demonstrate he's a man of action and he's getting things done, but right now it just looks way too much like Trump. So stay 1,000 miles away from that.
I mean, I'm just picturing this. You imagine the reaction online if Pierre Poilievre had sat there, if he had won the election, he was the prime minister and he was sitting down there and he was doing this, signing like a fake executive order. Cam, can you imagine the outrage?
Yeah,
I mean, to me, this is silliness, what he's doing here.
But at the same time, let's be honest, there is a Trumpy nature to Poilievre. The only thing I would say, though, and I agree with Tim on this, the first time that Carney did it, it was cheeky, right? It was like a little job. It's like when Wab Kinew did it when he was taking American liquor off the shelves. Because even then, he did it with this grimace and this smile that made you know that he was being cheeky, right? You can't do that again. And again, like, not only does it not land, it doesn't make any sense to do. Like, you can make that announcement in a lot of different ways without having to do that. So to me, that's just a real bad choice on their part. And yeah, it opens up this entire conversation, but honestly, it also eats into what makes Carney stronger, which is his seriousness. That isn't serious. So to me, it's like, I don't know why they thought that would work well with what he's trying to lay down, because it doesn't match up.
Yeah, okay. We'll be right back. We'll talk about the fact that there's not going to be a budget this year. There will be a fall economic statement, but no budget. What do you think, Cam, about the idea of there not being a budget, just a fall economic statement later this year?
Honestly, my only concern is we haven't been given a good reason as to why. If there's a good, legitimate reason to not do a budget right now, that should have been said. All we got was that, we're just not going to do it. It'll be in the fall. And you know what? That doesn't cut it. We've gone too long without one. And to me, I would have expected, again, what I would expect from Mark Carney. He's the serious adult in the room. This should be in his wheelhouse. So without an explanation as to why you're not doing it, it doesn't look good at all. It's a bad look.
Bad look. Tim, what would you say?
Yeah, you're just building what Cam said. Look, if you're going to do a proper budget, it does take 6 to 8 months. That doesn't mean you can't do something small. And yes, it would be symbolic, but that, I think, to Cam's point, is what we're looking for. I mean, Mark Carney is our first prime minister in living memory that has served as a senior official in finance. He knows how that department works. Even if he came out to Cam's point and said, you know what, I've worked there. Here's what I can tell you as to why I'm not doing it. And maybe he will. But again, an own goal on them yesterday, not explaining why they're going down this road. Now they're able to be framed as having some self-interest.
Something to hide.
Yeah.
I mean, usually, a new government could always say, well, here's the budget. And oh my gosh, we had no idea it was this bad. That would be kind of awkward now, I guess, but you can't really do that. Let me ask you this in closing. We heard from the Bloc leader about 2 hours ago, Yves-Francois Blanchette. They're going to try and launch a court fight against this situation in Terrebonne, which Elections Canada says is settled and it's final, and that's going to be a Liberal riding. And the Bloc lost that by 1 vote, despite the fact that this woman can prove I voted for the Bloc, and Elections Canada screwed up. And now there are reports that Elections Canada screwed up with other ballots as well. Is this thing really settled? What do you see happening here, Cam? What do you think?
Well, you know what, Rob? I'm going to tell you a little something. In the last election in my home riding at Kenora, there were a total of 4 First Nations, Northern First Nations, that Elections Canada failed to provide any polling stations in. Thousands of voters disenfranchised, and in a result which probably swung the riding to the Conservatives. All
Okay.
Elections Canada did says, oops, my bad, writes a report, says I'll never do it again. Except it happened again this time in northern Quebec with about 3 Inuit communities where thousands of people were disenfranchised. So personally, should this be happening in Terrebonne? No. But I find it very interesting how even in this day and age, we're going to twist ourselves into pretzels over 6 people in postal votes when something went wrong, but thousands of people get disenfranchised elsewhere, and we can't even muster a shrug or a change to make it happen. So, yeah, you know what? It is what it is, I guess.
Okay. No, that's a very good point that you make. Tim, go ahead, Tim.
About Terrebonne? Yeah, this one is just fascinating. Like you said, now with the 5 missing votes, the overturning at the end, I think we're getting to a place with this where the Prime Minister is going to have a better answer than it's Elections Canada will get to the bottom of this. It probably wouldn't hurt him. I feel like I'm giving them a lot of free advice today. It probably wouldn't hurt them to say, all right, we've seen this, we're concerned as well. We will ask Elections Canada to do a deeper dive here. But hey, after years of talking about foreign interference, and there's nothing here to suggest that's the case.
No.
People will leap to that conclusion
Exactly.
unless we put a little bit of a spotlight on it.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Great to talk to you. That's why you're my favorites. Just don't tell the others. Thank you again. We'll speak soon. Yeah, I am. That's okay. Bye-bye. Cam Holmstrom, principal at Nipaway Strategies, and Tim Powers from Summa Strategies. I'm Rob Snow. Talkback is coming up next. Housing. Making housing more affordable for young people. That's our topic today, right after the news on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. It's 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. And today's topic is the housing crisis. The housing crisis. And here are some questions to kind of get the conversation started today. Give them some thought. Give us a call. 1-833-668-2577 is our call-in line. 1-833-668-2577. I mean, the big question is, what can be done to make housing more affordable for younger Canadians? What can be done to make housing more affordable for younger Canadians? Give us some ideas. We want to hear any and all ideas that you have. This was a huge issue during the election campaign. It's been a huge issue for years. Younger Canadians. How many news stories have there been over the years? Younger Canadians and their struggles to get into the housing market, to buy a place to call their own, to have a chance to put down roots and be part of a community and build some equity and create some personal wealth. Because unless the younger Canadians are in line to inherit some money from their parents, that dream of home ownership, it's going to be out of reach for a lot of them. But what if it doesn't have to be out of reach? What are some policies that could be put in place that would make housing more affordable for younger Canadians? What can be done to make that happen? To go from, that sounds like a great idea, to actually making it happen. 1-833-668-2577. That's our main question of the day. And then we have some other kind of side issues that we want to get into. Here's another question for you. We're just going to throw it out there because it's in the news. We'll see what kind of answers come back. What if you are an older Canadian? You've built up equity in your own house. Maybe you're lucky enough you've paid off your mortgage. You're mortgage free. You're sitting on this asset. It's appreciated a lot over time. How willing would you be to see the value of that home, the potential sale price of that home, fall in order to make that home a little bit more affordable for a younger buyer? A home like yours, make it more affordable for a younger buyer. Is that something you could live with? Something that would be acceptable to you? Falling home prices? What if that ate into the value of your home, that made that home potentially more affordable for a younger buyer? I mean, just how would you feel about that? This is kind of the tightrope that the Carney government is trying to walk right now. It recognizes that housing is unaffordable for younger Canadians, but it doesn't want to scare older Canadians who are more likely to own their homes, have a lot of equity in their homes, by saying housing prices need to come down. Kind of want to have it both ways. The new housing minister said as much yesterday. Here's something else we want you to think about. Here's another question for you. What kind of housing would you like to see built? If the Mark Carney government is going to follow through on what it says it's going to do, create a new government agency, get the government back into the business of building homes, it says, what kind of housing should be built? Public housing, some call it social housing, low rental housing. What do you think of the idea of the government building rather inexpensive cookie cutter style homes, similar to the homes that were being built during the war years and shortly after the Second World War, what were known as strawberry homes or victory homes, very basic homes, 800 square foot homes, 2 bedrooms. Some of them didn't even have basements. What would you think if that was part of a government plan to build lots and lots of homes like that? Sound good to you? Good idea? There are neighborhoods all across Canada, communities large and small. The streets are lined with homes like that. What if homes like that made a comeback under a government program and made a comeback in a big, big way? And one more thing to consider. I mean, it's a debate that's happening. This one here, this is a debate that's happening at the municipal level of government all across the country. City councils all across the country are dealing with housing density, building fourplexes, building triplexes on one building lot where there used to be a single family home. What if your municipality, maybe under the orders of the provincial government or under pressure from the federal government, made that the zoning bylaw where you live? You can have a fourplex on this lot now. You can have a triplex on this lot right now. And there's nothing neighbors can do to challenge it or anything. Is that something you're up for? Young Canadians still want to own homes. They haven't given up on that dream, but serious changes are needed if those dreams are going to come true for a lot of younger Canadians. So what should be done? We are open to hearing any and all ideas today. What can be done to make housing more affordable for younger Canadians? 1-833-668-2577 is our call-in line. If you've never called us before, just mention that, and we will make your call a priority. And we'll start with your phone calls next on Talkback. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The big question is what can be done to make housing more affordable for younger Canadians? And then we can talk about social housing or strawberry homes and victory homes and fourplexes and triplexes, and whether you're open as an older homeowner, maybe a mortgage-free homeowner, what would it mean if housing prices went down for you, but that home became more affordable potentially for a younger buyer? Feel free to comment on any aspect of this discussion. We're open to hearing anything. 1-833-668-2577. Fritz up first today in Calgary. Thanks for calling, Fritz.
Good morning.
Hi there.
You touched on the issue about social housing. I think the governments definitely have to get into that. It is one way to get rid of the destitute, basically. I was born in Vienna, and I grew up in one of those. And what they've done is they've built fairly large complexes, and probably I think it's something like 40% of the city has these kind of places. And what happens is they are very low rent. They're taken care of so that the outside of suites is taken care of by the government. You pay low rent, and what's happening, especially after the Second War, the people that can't afford it, they apply to move in. Then they move in, and eventually they are able to save money to get out into something that's a little better. Like in our case, the expectation would be to move into a house. Other than that, they move into better suites and so on. And these places, they are. The German word translates into municipal housing rather than just social housing. And the municipal housing, it is partly financed by the municipality, and then the provincial government would be involved in financing this. You have to purchase the land first, and then you build on it, and then you set up administration for it. In Europe, it's called the Vienna model. They started before the First World War. They had a lot of hovels and slums. And it's basically today the similar situation is the homeless people. They got no place to go. And the private enterprise has absolutely no interest to build.
Yeah, well, of course, there's no money in that. There's no money in deeply affordable housing, right?
Exactly. And anybody that puts money into housing, you're not going to go to provide something low cost. You want to make money.
Sure.
So it has
so if the government made big investments into social housing, public housing, you used to call it municipal housing, and they're mostly in the big cities run by municipal housing corporations anyway. You think that would be a good idea? Okay, fair enough, Fritz. You've got us off and running here. Thank you, Fritz. Frank in Surrey, British Columbia. Hello, Frank.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Frank. Good to hear from you today. Thanks for calling. What do you think?
Yeah, I've been quite interested in your discussion about housing this morning. You were talking about Gregor Robertson, who's the new housing minister, former mayor of Vancouver, well known in British Columbia as Mayor Moonbeam.
Mayor Moonbeam, that's right, yeah.
And, his comments were completely ridiculous when he says housing costs should not go down. They need to go down dramatically. We've felt it here for the last 10, 15 years. I own a nice home. It's worth some money. I'd be happy if it fell 25%. It wouldn't bother me.
Oh, really?
Least.
Wouldn't bother you?
I would like younger people to have a chance to own their own homes and not a 300 square foot apartment which is being built as housing. That's not housing. Two people can't even live there. So
why do you think he said that? Why do you think he said that when he's asked pretty much? Well, let's listen. We don't have to listen to the whole clip, David, but the shorter clip of Gregor Robertson. The housing prices need to come down. Let's play that again.
Do you think home prices need to go down? No, I think that we need to deliver more supply.
Why would he?
We do need to deliver more supply.
Right, which would drop the price, you would think, based on supply and demand. But I don't understand why he would say something like that. I have an idea why he would say something like that. But.
Well, I think on the housing file, when he was the mayor of Vancouver, he was all over the map. I mean, they brought in a ton of regulations. They made housing more expensive. But he also was heavily financed by developers when he was the mayor of Vancouver. They put most of the money into his campaigns. So he was acting in the developer's interest at that time, despite everything he may have said. He also pledged that he was going to completely end homelessness in Vancouver. It is now more than 2 times as many homeless people in the city of Vancouver as there was when he was the mayor. So I don't think he's got a lot of credibility on this file at this point in time, but we'll see what happens. In terms of social housing, your first caller said, I'd love to see more social housing on that model. We used to have that. Canada used to provide a lot of money to finance social housing through CMHC. They haven't been doing that for many years. We have a limited amount of it here that the province funds, but the province hasn't got the deep pockets to finance it like the federal government does.
Yeah, okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you,
yeah,
Frank,
great talking to
for
you,
calling
Rob.
from British Columbia. Hope you'll call back sometime. Omar is a first-time caller in Kitchener, Ontario. Hello, Omar.
Hello, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, Omar. We're trying to make housing more affordable for younger Canadians. We're looking for some ideas. What are yours?
So, my background is originally from Turkey, and the way the government does there is something that I've actually thought about. Why can't they do something like that here in Canada, where the government is actually partnered up with a large builder, like a building company, like 50-50 partnership, where the government gives the land to this builder to build condos, houses, affordably for people that have never bought a house, that don't have any house in their, like their parents don't have a home or they don't have a home at all.
Okay.
They have to have a minimum, which is like a maximum income threshold where they're eligible for it.
Okay.
Because the land is free the government actually sells these houses at cost of the builder's building cost, right?
Wow,
And
okay,
you can't
okay.
sell this property. You can't sell this property for a minimum of 10 years.
Okay.
If you're buying it, and this would allow for a lot of younger people to be able to actually afford homes, to be able to buy them, and the government finances this as well in a sense where the way they do it there is it's like almost like paying rent. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
You pay a very little. You pay a very little deposit up front to sign up, and the way they do it is they do it across the whole nation. And you enter a draw. So if your name is, you know what I mean? Let's say there's
Sure.
10,000 people registered for it in Kitchener. And if you know what I mean? If your name is drawn and they have, let's say, 500 units built this year, they do a draw for 500 units. Whoever's name gets picked, they end up being able to take possession of the house. It's a draw system where I think it's fair in a lot of aspects. And people that have never owned a house are able to actually afford a house or a condo with this setup. We have all the land in the world. Like, I don't know why we're cluttering everybody into a pocket and then saying, oh, we need to lower the housing. Okay, why doesn't the government step in this aspect to be able to allow these people to afford a house and get their foot on, to be able to have a foot to stand on?
Do you know the name of that program, Omar, by any chance?
It's called TOKI. TOKI. It's in Turkey.
TOKI. Okay. All right. We're going to look that up. That sounds interesting. Yeah, I want to know more about that. Thank you, Omar. Very interesting. Good idea. Rick in Dartmouth up next. Hi, Rick.
Hi, Rob. I got some bad news. This problem that we have was not created overnight, and it was created on purpose. It was created to add more people to Canada, and I call it the problem reaction solution. And the reason I know this for a fact is certainly my experience in Halifax, Dartmouth area, as a small landlord, is that 10 years ago, the vacancy rate was around 6 to 7%. It fluctuated, and it had remained there for quite some time. And at that particular junction, people could rent lots of different places for low rent. There were hardly any, if any, homeless people that were there other than they decided to be there themselves. And this solution to this problem can be only fixed in the same amount of time it took to create it. And the creating of the problem was adding 2 million people to Canada's population. It just pushed everything to the brink of the laws, supply and demand.
Sure.
And we live in a free market economy, and most of the time, and that's what really started the problem. So kudos to all the people trying to come up with solutions, but there are just simply too many people for too few spaces. And for example, in Halifax right now, there are approximately 30 high-rise buildings going up in the central core. We're talking between 25 and 40 stories, and these are all residential towers, and they will add a whole bunch of rental space.
Okay.
But they'll be extremely expensive. So, the previous caller you had on, I couldn't quite catch everything he was saying, but you're going to look it up. So I'm expecting a report on that, Rob.
Okay. All right. Okay.
All right.
You think it's going to take years to solve this, though?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Way more pain for the gain. And
well, I mean, really CMHC says we have to build 700,000 homes a year for the next 5 years. 700,000. The most we've ever built is 273,000. That's the record.
Yeah. And houses versus apartment building units. I mean, I hate to bring up the WEF, but that's their idea, is to squeeze everything together. They're maniacs here.
Well, I don't want to get into that today. We'll talk about that another day. We'll be right back. Thank you, Rick, though, for your call from Dartmouth, who says it's going to take a long time to fix this problem. Well, you've got to start somewhere. We just want to hear some ideas today. I'm Rob Snow. It's News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
The housing crisis is our topic for the day. What can be done to make housing more affordable for younger Canadians? Peter up next in Alberta. Hi, Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hello.
Hi, Peter.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, thank you.
So frankly, I don't think that the reason that they want to keep housing prices, hold the line on it, is because of taxes. They make more money in taxes the higher the price of the house. So they have no real incentive to bring down the cost of houses.
On the sale price of a house, on the land transfer taxes, those sorts of things.
And I agree with your last caller. I mean, demand is far outstripped supply. And it's going to take years for them to catch up to that. It's just.
What, so you think it's hopeless? There's nothing we can do? There's nothing we can do? Or there's nothing they plan to do?
Stupid how they've done things here.
Okay. You're not very hopeful that prices are going to come down, or that we can even build enough supply to bring prices down, or build the right kind of housing to get younger buyers into the market?
They're not going to be until there's some incentive for the government to restructure taxes.
Okay.
There's no incentive for the government to make housing more affordable.
Okay. All right. I wish I was. I'm going to be a little more hopeful than you are, Peter. You don't sound very hopeful at all. I mean, I'm curious. Thank you, Peter, for your call. The former mayor of Vancouver is now the Minister of Housing, Gregor Robertson, getting some heat in the news media and from his political opponents because of that comment that he made yesterday to a news reporter when he was asked straight up, do housing prices need to come down? And he said no. That's what he said. He said no. The market needs to be stable. The market needs to be stable. And he said we need to build a lot more affordable housing, and we need to bring on more supply. So some people are wondering what kind of economic voodoo is this guy spewing? Because you would think if you build lots and lots of housing, if you increase the housing supply and demand would dictate prices would come down. So it sounds like the housing minister is trying to have his cake and eat it too. That's one of the accusations today. Now, David and I were talking about this morning, and we were thinking, well, why would he say what he said? You have a housing minister. I think there's some politics involved here. You have a housing minister who's trying to appeal to multiple constituencies, but most of all, the constituency that helped the Liberals win the election, and that's older voters who have either very small mortgage payments, lots of home equity, or no mortgage payments at all. They paid off their mortgage, and the house is worth a whole lot more than when they first bought it. So he doesn't want to freak those people out. And he wants to tell young people, we're going to build lots and lots of affordable housing. We're going to make housing more affordable. Although it sounds like he's talking, David, to me, it sounds like he's talking more about social housing or public housing, or what one of the callers, Fritz, called municipal housing.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is your dream as a younger Canadian. Do you want to live in public housing?
No.
No, this is not your dream to live in a government-owned house, but I get where he's coming from. He's trying to convince we're on top of the affordability issue, but he doesn't want to freak out all the older Canadians who helped elect this government, the boomers, who have all kinds of housing wealth and don't want to see housing prices come down because it's a major financial asset for them. For many, their most important financial asset is their home. It's what's going to fund the latter years of their lives. I mean, those are just the facts of life. I'm sure we've all seen it. I'm sure you've seen it. Maybe it's part of your family story. Parents, grandparents have a home. It's paid off. It's worth whatever it's worth, 400, 600, 800 grand. But mom or dad don't live in the home anymore. They're in a retirement home or a nursing home. And David, you did a search. How much do those places cost? $5,000?
Yeah, they range from $5,000 to upwards of $10,000 a month.
A month.
Yeah, not right?
Cheap. And how are those bills paid? Well, for a lot of Canadians, older Canadians, probably from the equity that's been built up in the home. And then whatever is left over when the person passes is whatever is left over. That's just a fact of life for the Canadian government right now. It might not be able to afford a big drop in home prices, because if that were to happen, a lot of elderly Canadians might not be able to afford the very latter years of their lives. It's just a brutal reality, Dave. It's just a brutal reality. I think that's one of the reasons Gregor Robertson said what he said yesterday about home prices not needing to come down. And yet, if you talk to anyone under the age of 40 in this country, they would say, stuff and nonsense. Of course, housing prices need to come down, and they need to come down a lot, or I'm never going to be able to buy a house. Karen in Calgary, you're up next, Karen. Hi there.
Hey, Rob, finally a topic I know about.
Okay.
I used to work in social housing in Calgary.
Oh, you did? Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We had two different programs. One was government bought houses, and one was called the PLRS, which is private landlord rent subsidies.
Oh, yeah.
So landlords would apply to take in families, and whatever the family, the rent is based on 30% of their income, and then the government would pick up the difference. So if the house was $1,500, the family's paying $400, the government would pay them $1,100 a month.
Right.
So that's how
so
they
a rental supplement program then.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the other part was total social housing, which, let's just be frank, if you don't own the house, you don't care.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of damage, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours about how the tenants just don't care. And, we used to go, it's transitional housing. You make your money, okay? 30% of your income's for rent. If you were going to school, it was $150 a month. Then if you got a job and you're making $4,000 a month, your rent didn't change for 3 months. They'd let you accumulate wealth, get your damage deposits ready and everything, and see you later.
Right.
Yeah.
But in your experience in that with what I call social housing, right? Not the rental supplement side, but the social housing side.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of turnover in tenancy?
There was a lot, but what happened is
Okay.
also people would quit jobs because you'd say, oh, sorry, you're making more money, your rent has to go up. And then they would quit.
Right, okay.
And say, oh, no, sorry, I need a rent adjustment. They'd come in and get their rent lowered because that was the option, right? If you start charging too much money, they would just say, oh, yeah, you're accumulating wealth. Well, then maybe I won't work as much. Or, it was unbelievable. But I agree with the home equity. That's just, I want to make that point, because they're planning on taxing the equity in our houses. That's why they don't want the costs to go down.
They keep denying that that's the plan, but as I say, they have spent $500,000 studying it. They say they're not going to do it. The advice would be, don't do it unless you want mass protests in Ottawa. But
outside.
I don't know. Okay. Thank you, Karen. Good to hear from you on Talkback today. We have 3 lines available today. We're talking about housing affordability. We're kicking around some ideas today. If you have any, we'd love to hear from you. 1-833-668-2577. To Mark in Kitchener today. Hello, Mark. Thanks for calling.
Good afternoon. I'm not an economist, and I'm a boomer. And so I'm trying to think outside of the box for your kids. So let's say you have $1 million home, you're retired, or you're on your way to be retirement, or whatever it is, and you've got 3 children, and so you give each of your children, you get a mortgage on your house for $750,000. You put $250,000 into a mortgage for your kids. How you kids contribute to it, or how you do, is irrelevant from my point of view. An economist can figure that out. Okay. But then what would happen is this mortgage, after 10 years, would the mortgagor the mom and dad who got rid of it, they can then get 50% of what they put in and write that off completely. And all mortgage payments that they're making during the period of time that's there, just like in the States, the mortgage payments should be written off of whatever their other income is, whether it's real income or investment income.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that way That way the kids have $250,000.
Right,
If they
to
can
get
pay
started.
back to mom and dad 20% a month of the mortgage payments
Okay.
or whatever, that's between them. But mom
Okay.
and dad then get the benefit of writing 50% off. We'll write
Get
all
some
the,
kind
all
of
the
tax
payments
benefit.
off
Sure.
on the
Okay.
mortgages.
Okay. Yeah. Like some kind of generational wealth transfer that helps the children get a head start in the real estate market, and some kind of tax relief for the parent.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Not a crazy idea.
And I think you need an economist to figure that out.
Yeah.
But,
And grown men
I'm
cry when I
sure
do math,
it's
so
not that difficult.
far from me to weigh in on it. But we want to hear all ideas. That's not a bad idea.
Okay.
Based on what I know, and I only know what you've told me. So I thank you for your call, Mark. You're thinking outside the box, which is what we love around here. Let's go to Sharon in Calgary up next on TalkBack. Hi, Sharon. Hi, Sharon.
I believe government needs to stay out of a lot of business in the country.
Okay.
And then the taxes could be lowered.
Okay.
And people could afford to do things in a more normal way.
Right.
People do not have the right to own a home, but children have been indulged for years by their parents, and now they think the government should indulge them. They have to stop smoking and drinking and going on vacation and save up their money.
Okay.
And they, at some point, may be able to buy a home. I raised 3 kids on my own.
Right.
I divorced, and my ex did not pay any child support.
Okay.
I was a low-income earner. I tucked every $20 aside for a down payment. So it wasn't
even a 10% down payment on the average selling price of a home in Canada now, which is $702,000. You're talking about $70,000. How long do you think you'd have to tuck away $20 bills to save up $70,000?
The whole thing is you
Sharon.
don't need to buy a $700,000 home. I bought a condo, and then I upgraded to a house later on. I still don't own a $700,000 home, but
Nor do I.
tucked away my money, and my son, I couldn't help him because I was poor. He worked in the oil sands for 2 years, 100 hours a week. He tucked away that money and saved it for a down payment on a house. So he was able to buy a house.
Right. So is it your main message today that younger Canadians who are struggling to afford a home just need to be more frugal? Work harder, be more frugal, forgo any luxuries?
I didn't go on holidays. I didn't smoke. I didn't drink.
Sure, fair enough.
Tucked away every penny I could.
Okay, it's a popular opinion. It's a popular opinion. We've heard it before. Thank you, Sharon. We're tight on time. Got to run. We'll be back. Take more of your phone calls. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Sherry in Halifax. Thanks for calling, Sherry. Hi there.
Hi.
Go ahead.
I don't have kids. I own my own house.
Okay.
I don't have a mortgage. I'm in my 50s. I'm single.
Oh, good for you.
I don't want the value of my house to go down. And this is terrible to say, but I have no sense of responsibility to the younger generation. I feel like we all struggled in our own way. We made sacrifices. We decided to kick our debt and save. And I think that that's just part of adulthood.
Yeah. You don't think it's different now?
Not really, because
Not really?
$150,000 to $250,000 seemed unreasonable to us 20 years ago.
Right.
It seemed like a lot of money to my parents. They bought their first house when it was like $26,000. So
Sure.
I don't know. I just feel like, it does seem unattainable, but at the same time, the developers have had a lot to do with determining the market value. I think they need to reset that with the government. Help the homeless first, affordable apartments for low to middle income, and as far as people that are young, I don't think that their parents should be trying to give them houses or anything else. I mean, I hate to say it, but when the parents get elderly, they're going to need long-term care, and I'm telling you, it's expensive because my parents
I know.
were in
Yeah, we just
long-term
talked
care.
about that. Yeah, we just talked about that. But you don't want housing prices to come down, even if it made homes more affordable for that younger buyer. You feel
Not mine, anyways.
Not yours. Okay. Not yours, because you
I
have
think
yours.
Maybe they could do it in
Right.
places like Vancouver, where it's been inflated
Okay.
for a very long time. Big
Right.
cities, maybe, and even here in Halifax.
Well, you're calling from
it's
Halifax. The
overinflated.
average sale price of a home, and not that everybody is out there looking for a $600,000 house, but when a house sells in Halifax, it usually sells for about $600,000 now.
Yeah,
It's a lot of money.
ridiculous, actually.
I mean, when I was growing up in Cape Breton Island, somebody would say $600,000. $600,000 would be a palace. It would be
that
a
seems
palace.
crazy. Yeah.
Well, that's what
I do
it's
agree with
going
that
for
part.
now. That's what it's going for
I don't
now.
know what the answer is. I don't know if the government
Okay.
will figure it out
Right.
either.
Okay.
It's a big
All right.
mess.
As long as, yeah, okay. But you don't. That's really harsh, That's really harsh. You feel no obligation to the younger generations because you have made your sacrifices and they will have to make theirs. Okay.
Yeah, I hate to
All
say
right.
it, but I think
Okay.
that's it.
You're like the Buckley's mixture call today, Sherry. You and Sharon today. Taste awful. Maybe it works.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Talkback. We've been talking about the housing affordability crisis with a focus on younger Canadians and what can be done to make housing more affordable for younger Canadians. We've been talking about social housing and public housing, post-war homes, housing density, fourplexes, triplexes. And if older Canadians would be open to lower home prices, if that meant homes like yours would be more affordable, even if it meant a loss in home equity for you. So we're coming at this from all kinds of angles. Now, let me introduce this because I'd really like to know what you think of this. One of Mark Carney's ideas is to have a new agency or a crown corporation, Canada Builds. I'll be curious to see how this takes shape, what its mandate is. But if you think back to the election campaign, the Liberal Party was running ads during the election campaign about building more homes and hearkening back to the war years and the post-war years of the Second World War. I've been doing some reading about this. I do not claim to be an expert by any measure, just read a couple of articles online about something called Wartime Housing Limited, or WHL, Wartime Housing Limited. Now, to me, depending on the execution, maybe this has some promise. I'd like to know what you think of this idea. So there was this, what we would call now a crown corporation, created during the war in 1941, because a lot of people were moving from rural areas into the cities to work in factories as part of the war effort, and they needed a place to live. And then as veterans began returning home from overseas, they, of course, needed to be housed as well. So it was the job of this crown corporation, Wartime Housing Limited, to build those homes. Maybe some of you have lived in these homes. Wartime Housing Limited, very interesting, maybe even promising. Wartime Housing Limited basically became a housing developer. It did everything that the modern housing developer would do now in the year 2025. It bought the land, it built the houses, and in its first year, 1941, it built 13,000 houses in 57 communities across the country. And here's more or less how it would work. The municipality would provide building lots to the federal agency, Wartime Housing Limited, for a nominal sum. And the municipality supplied the municipal services, water, sewer, electricity. And in return, the federal agency, WHL, would remit back to the municipality a fee per house. So the money would go from the federal government to the municipal government. Very modest houses. In the beginning, it was expected that these would actually be temporary homes. A lot of them were built without basements. And then a few years later, around 1944 or so, WHL started building homes for families, veterans coming home for the war. And what it did at that point was it went out, it hired architects, builders, and it told them to come up with a series of pre-approved plans, give us, half a dozen models or so that could be built really fast and pretty cheap. And then once the houses were built, they were rented out. And WHL was the landlord. And using that model, in 6 years, they built 50,000 homes, 800 square feet or so, most of them 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. After the war was over, they got rid of this Crown Corporation, Wartime Housing Limited, and they created what became Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, or CMHC, and all of the assets of the Wartime Housing Limited were handed over to CMHC, and CMHC hired urban planners, designed communities like subdivisions filled with these modest houses. And CMHC got into the mortgage guaranteeing business for veterans. So a veteran could go to the bank with the backing of CMHC, get a 25-year mortgage, 1 interest rate for the whole term, and a payment that was about the same as rent at the time. And they could buy the house, and the average selling price of the house at that time, $5,000 to $6,000. Now, this would have been mid to late 40s. CMHC was created in 1947 out of Wartime Housing Limited. So $5,000 to $6,000 sounds cheap, but the average salary that in those days was about $3,000 a year. If you're making $4,000 or $5,000 a year, you'd be making really good money. Those houses became known as strawberry houses, victory houses, and there are neighborhoods all across the country where the streets are lined with these houses, even to this day. I just wonder how realistic it is. What would be the barriers or the obstacles to doing something like that in the year 2025? Only do it on steroids. Do it on steroids, because we need a lot more than, 50,000 homes over 6 years. We need 3.5 million homes over 5 years. You'd need to up the pace dramatically. Sound, I don't know, doable? What do you think? Just another angle to the whole story. I find that one interesting, though, because it's been done before. And a lot of times you don't have to reinvent the wheel. 1-833-668-2577. But we'll follow your lead on the housing question today. Terry in Calgary. Terry, thanks for waiting, Terry.
Hey, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm good, Terry. How you doing?
No, I'm doing really good. Just wanted to weigh in on this a little bit. The CMHC thing there, years ago, because I built my first house getting a mortgage through them. And that was the key. I built the house.
Okay.
So you had sweat equity and built a nice front to back split, 1,200 square feet, could develop the third level. That added on, so you had 1,800 square feet, and all said and done, if I remember correctly, it cost a whole $63,000 back in the 80s.
Wow.
So, some initiative for, I don't know why they took that away. I think it's mostly because of developers wanting to have the lots for themselves.
Okay.
But back then, you could buy a lot. They had lots set aside for that purpose, where you could purchase a lot, and you had a 1 year, I think it was. You had 1 year to build that house on that lot, or you lost it.
Oh, really? Okay.
The other thing that I think, too, there's a caller 2 or 3 back talked about kids being raised a certain way.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of kids want what they have, like right now. They don't want to leave that.
Right.
So I think you could probably build, what's wrong with building a home that can be improved upon over the years as you live there? Does it have to have Berber throughout and granite countertops right away?
Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, hardwood floors, everything else.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
You just do it very modest, and as your income raises, as you get more skilled at whatever profession you're in, then you start to improve it.
Okay. All right. Yeah, very interesting.
Add the air conditioning now. That kind of thing.
Yes.
But
Terry.
now everybody wants this stuff all up front.
Okay. The tastes have changed. The expectations are too extravagant.
I feel that.
You feel that? Well, you're certainly not alone today.
That.
You're like the third or fourth person who has brought up that particular opinion today. Thank you, Terry. And just like that, we're on our way. So we have 1, 2, 3 lines available there. 1-833-668-2577. Hour number 2 of Talkbacks. What would you say? Debbie's up next. Hi, Debbie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Debbie. Yeah, I hear you just fine. Go ahead.
Hi. In regards to Carney's platform, I think it's a decent idea. I just think, how are they going to prioritize who's in the most need? Like, he hasn't really said anything about determining what that looks like. And, like, are you just building for everyone? How are you determining the area? So I think just some of the policy pieces need to be mapped out. And then in terms of just, like, private developers, I think a lot of the issue right now is, like, it's so expensive to build. So, like, maybe we're getting a lot of builds. Like, I'm here in Calgary, and there's tons of apartments and et cetera being built up. But a lot of them are so expensive.
Yes.
So it's like, how can the government work with private developers to find ways to decrease those new builds and just the cost of those new builds so that folks can actually afford them?
Well, I think when it comes to, the term they're using now is deeply affordable rentals, okay? Deeply affordable. We used to just call it social housing or public housing. The new fashionable term is deeply affordable housing, deeply affordable housing.
Yeah, we've got levels.
Right? Maybe there's no role for the private sector in that. Because how do you incentivize the private sector to build housing where there's no profit for them? What's the incentive?
Right.
What's in it for them? Maybe it will have to be maybe it will have to be government housing.
Right, but
if it's to be
I don't know
deeply
how sustainable
affordable.
that is. You know, how sustainable is that? It just, the money downloads back onto the taxpayer. Like, maybe there's the option for, especially in these multi-unit buildings or complexes, the option for a mixed income model. So maybe you have some folks who are paying market rent, and then you have others that are paying like deeply, like you're saying, deeply affordable or, you know, very much below market rent.
Yes.
Like, is there an opportunity for that? So
yeah. And how do you do that? Do you do it through some kind of, maybe you do it through a rental supplement program or something?
Yeah, which Alberta has, and I know other areas in the country have, but I mean, there's only so much. So I think if we can leverage more private developers, but it's just, I don't know. I worry about downloading it all to government. I do, because I think it gets on the backs of citizens, right?
Yeah. Good point. Very good point, especially given the fiscal position of the government right now. Let's listen again to what the new Minister of Housing said yesterday. Gregor Robertson, he mentioned public housing a lot. Public housing, affordable housing. Let's listen again here.
Delivery need to go down. No, I think that we need to deliver more supply, make sure the market is stable. It's a huge part of our economy. We need to be delivering more affordable housing. The government of Canada has not been building affordable housing since the 90s, and we've created a huge shortage across Canada. That's where the big need is right now, and I'm very encouraged that the Prime Minister and our commitment right now in government is to double construction and focus on the affordable side.
Focus on the affordable side. Vera in Airdrie is up next. Vera.
Hello there.
Hi, Vera. Good to hear from you.
How you? Good. I'm glad to be able to speak with you. I am one of those people that lived in CMHC housing back in the 60s.
Okay.
CMHC in Montreal. It was called Benny Farm, and it was 3-story apartments. And there were a ton of us. And in the center, there was a back 40 where the kids would play, young kids, hockey rinks, all that. And it was a fantastic way to grow up. They were offered to people after the war, all the war veterans were in, and they still had some room. Why can't that happen again?
Okay. So you think that's a model that might have some promise then?
I think so.
Right.
It's community. There are how many people are living below the poverty level?
4
that
million.
really need housing.
If you want to know the number, we just saw the number last couple of weeks ago. It's 10% of the population is in poverty.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's 4 million people.
And why can't we do that? We seem to spend money in areas where it's not helping Canadians. Let's spend some money and do the right thing and build communities that they can live in and that are sustainable.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah. Good to hear from you, Debbie. Vera in Airdrie, who grew up in one of those kind of post-war developments that we talked about, developed by CMHC and earlier Wartime Housing Limited. Very interesting. Be right back.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Housing affordability has been our topic, and we've been seeking out ideas. What can be done to make housing more affordable for young Canadians? Hickey is up next, calling from Airdrie. Thank you, Hickey. You're on the air.
Thanks for taking my call, Rob. So a couple things. There's been some great ideas today. I love the part about, the entry-level housing where you get into a house that's subsidized, and as you outgrow that house, you at least have some equity to help you buy the second house from that first house. I think any subsidized housing that the government does, they should do it through a tax credit system, almost like a carbon rebate where you get a check each month back from the amount of taxes you paid in if you're in this low-income housing, because that still encourages working full-time jobs, even though you're in a subsidized housing type complex.
Okay.
And the other thing that I think that's crucial, I am a realtor in Calgary, and based on that, our fluctuation with interest rates, right now the stress test is 6.5%. You have to make $25,000 to $30,000 to qualify for a $100,000 mortgage, and that's a $500 to $600 payment per month. With all that math being said, for these first-time home buyers, things like condos in Toronto right now, we need to remove this stress test for first-time home buyers and not have it at 6.5%. And we need to follow the states in this way. We need to have longer amortization periods and longer mortgage periods. So if you're a new home buyer, you can get in at a 2.5% mortgage for 10 years. Our mortgage rates fluctuate so much that a lot of people get in, and as soon as the bank raises the rates too much, they can no longer afford it, and then they're foreclosing, which is the scary part for a lot of the entry-level first-time home buyers, which also really pauses a lot of the home builders from building at their capacity because they're not sure if they're going to sit on the inventory and have to hold it and stop building if all of a sudden the market shifts.
Okay. So longer amortizations and longer terms?
Longer terms. Sorry, we have a 30-year amortization.
Right.
And I know that your partner there said, oh, my God, I don't want to have to, owe $1 million for 30 years. But how many people actually ride their mortgage till the end of their term? They generally build equity over time and then transition as they need to, either into a bigger house or they right-size into a smaller
But like
home.
say the maximum now is 10 years, and it usually carries, I don't know. The difference between 10 years and 5 years is usually what? At least 2 percentage points, something like that?
At least 2 percentage points up, but not only that, also from the banking perspective, the penalty on it. I had a guy try and cancel a 10-year mortgage, and the penalty was about $60,000. So we need to look at the banking system and how the banks lend the money to these first-time home buyers, remove the stress test so that they can get into the market, and then help lock in from a rules and regulations perspective on how much they have to pay to the banks over a period of time. In the States, you buy a house, you lock in at 3%, you're there for 30 years. Right?
Yes.
And then you also write off the interest on the mortgage. If we wrote off the interest on the mortgage from a tax perspective in Canada, we're always trying to figure out these ways we can save people money in taxes. Well, one of them would be to write off the interest on the mortgages, because then all of a sudden it makes it a little more feasible for people to get in there.
Yeah, I mean, that goes both ways with the 30-year mortgage rates in the United States. I mean, it's great if they're at 3%, but right now they're at 6.8, and people are locked in for 30 years at 6.8, right?
Right, but that's also, I mean, they don't have the housing problem that we have up here. There's a lot of houses down there for sale, more inventory than ever before.
Right.
In Canada, we're trying to figure out what the solution is for our builders to build more houses. Yes, we're short on trades, but that's because the market fluctuates so much up and down that they're, they have a job one day, they don't have a job the next year. So it's just not consistent. If we have a plan of attack that we're going at it from a financial perspective and the government puts some rules in and helps, then all of a sudden there's going to be a lot more home builders doing it, and there's going to be a lot more consistency and people willing to get into the trades.
Okay, Hickey, some great ideas there. Thank you so much. To Luke up next in Calgary. Luke, you're on the air.
Hey, Rob, how are you?
Good, thank you. What's your opinion here?
Yeah, so I liked what the last caller was saying. A lot of it I agree with. The only thing I don't like the writing off the mortgage interest rates, just because writing off the mortgage interest rates, doesn't that mean that the taxpayer is paying for it? Like, essentially, at the end of the day, where does the money come from?
Okay.
Because for the government to absorb it, doesn't that mean everyone else is just paying for it? But
it would be money in your pocket instead of the government's money, unless you think the government could, spend that money more efficiently than, say, you could, Luke. I doubt that.
Well, no, because maybe I'm not saying it right, but I don't.
Okay.
I don't necessarily like the government absorbing money just for the sake of absorbing money, right? Like,
gotcha. Okay, fair enough.
I'm paying the interest, and then how does the government write it off for me? So there's that.
All right.
What was I going to say?
Don't know.
Yeah, I know, right? the whole affordable housing thing. Why are condos not, like, aren't condos affordable housing? I bought my first house was actually in Ontario. I bought 20 years ago, but out here I bought a house. I was living out here for about 7-8 years just renting, and I bought a condo. I bought a just under 600 square foot condo, right?
Right.
$150,000.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the case could be made. The condo is the starter home now, right? The condo is the starter home, right?
Right.
Wouldn't you say? Yeah. Fair enough.
Absolutely. You're not going to get. You can't, with the way the cities want density and whatnot, how are you going to build these wartime houses? Like, it's all a good idea and whatnot, but
well, that's a great point that you make as well.
The land has its value, right?
Yes, so, exactly.
And the minister is saying the answer is for housing prices not to come down. But if housing prices, it just doesn't add up.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Luke. Good to hear from you today. You make some good points that I wanted to build on. Actually, we'll do that when we come back.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Housing affordability, one of our topics of the day. Just to Luke's point, how would all of this work if we're to bring back these modest wartime houses? Because I have asked people who know a lot more about this stuff than I do, that they would point to a number of challenges. I would say, why can't we build those little victory houses that we had after the war? Why can't we build? Well, they would say there was a lot of land back then, and the land wasn't as valuable. All the, what I would call the cheap land, cheap compared to today, in and around the major cities is gone and spoken for. Where do you get the land, right? That's one question. And then if it's way outside of the city, environmentalists won't like that because that's sprawl, and they don't like sprawl, people having to drive their cars everywhere, no public transit. Another obstacle, development charges. So we're already hearing about this because municipalities, outside of property taxes, bylaw tickets, this kind of, municipalities don't have a lot of sources of revenue. They don't have the broad taxation powers of upper levels of government. So they have come to rely as a source of revenue. They have come to rely on development charges, and municipalities have been hiking those development charges dramatically over the years for new housing. It has actually been a major contributor to the housing affordability crisis, rising development charges. I mean, in Toronto, just one example, development charges on some rentals have gone up 400% in the last decade. The development charge for a builder to build a one-bedroom apartment is $52,000 now per apartment. And for a single family home in Toronto, the development charge per home is $142,000. I mean, it would be nice if you could build the whole home, even if it is a modest 2-bedroom home, like one of those post-war homes. And it cost $142,000. Not that the development charges were $142,000. I mean, that's the kind of affordability we should be aiming for. Safari, up next in Kitchener. Thanks for calling, Safari. Hi there. No? Okay. Let's go to Al then in Calgary. Hi, Al. You're on the air, Al.
Hey, good afternoon, Rob.
Yeah, hi, Al. Good. Thank you.
So just, something to speak of. A building built in Calgary about 4 years ago now. I know somebody who moved into it as a renter when it was brand new for a small 2-bedroom. They were paying $1,100 a month. I know somebody who moved into that same building just this past year, the same apartment layout, identical, was now up to $1,850 a month.
Wow.
We don't have rent control here. So the developer who maintained the building as an owner is making great money. You know, hats off to them. They're in the business for the business. Now, if our government was to say, tender that same building to 3 different builders, they would buy the building, mortgage the building accordingly. Let's say it's a 60-unit building. 60 people who move in, equalized payment between the 60 of them would pay the mortgage, the utilities, etc., for that building. The government would own that building and keep it in their hands as an affordable housing for people to for the young people to get into the market. And pay a rent that allows them to save money to be able to buy a house. Right now, we have people all over this city who are paying $1,900 a month in rent, but they don't qualify for a $1,500 a month mortgage.
Yes.
Something's wrong with that picture. The bank knows they're paying $1,900 a month today, but why wouldn't they give them a mortgage for $50,000? You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
There's got to be a way that this doesn't cost taxpayer money. The government will own it, and they will recuperate the mortgage of that building through the low-income rentals.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not opposed to that. I'm not a big fan of rent control. Just as a policy.
Well, no, and you know what? There is going to be fancier, nicer buildings that you as an owner own, and you charge the market rate for it. But at the same time, if people qualify, due to income or whatever, due to their circumstances,
I understand.
Then we have to give an option to them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it sounds like I understand that. It sounds like this government is a lot more interested in what you're saying, what we would call public housing, social housing.
Yeah.
Right. That given the housing affordability crisis and the homelessness crisis, that the logical conclusion is we need more, what the fashionable term now is, deeply affordable housing. Deeply affordable
housing, yes.
Right. That's the fashionable term.
We have to do something. When I was a kid growing up, I thought, I'm never going to be able to afford a house. Well, I got to the point in my life where I could afford a house. Now my kids are at that point where they're going, I could never afford a house. But as your wages grow, you grow in life, you get to the point where you can't afford a house. But if we're crippling them right out of the nest at
with high rents,
$100 a month,
in
rent, how can they ever save to get that down?
Yeah. That's a great point you make, Al. Yeah. I don't dispute anything you say. Thank you. We'll be right back with some closing thoughts on Talkback on a Thursday here on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Here with David Smith, winding things down for the Thursday Talkback. Thank you for all of your calls today. A lot of interesting ideas from you on attempts to make housing more affordable. David's ears begin to ring when he does hear from callers who say, well, you just have to make more sacrifices. Right, David, you're just not working hard enough.
Yeah.
Your avocado toast and your $9 lattes is at the real heart of the problem, David. Maybe you should get a third job.
I already have 2 jobs. Maybe the third that'll be the trick. Yeah. You know, I was going to buy a $500,000 2-bedroom condo downtown, but no granite countertop, Rob, so I can't do it. I'm going to hold out for, I'll go as high as $750 as long as I can get my granite countertop.
Just on social housing, public housing, maybe I can close with some thoughts on this. The idea of the government building a lot more social housing, or what it now calls deeply affordable housing. And given the housing affordability crisis, the homelessness crisis, we need more deeply affordable housing. So it goes. But I'm sure if you went to young people like David and said, we're going to build apartment buildings and row houses and townhomes, and the Municipal Housing Corporation is going to run it, and you can live in social housing or public housing, I'm not really sure that's what young people have in mind. They want a place of their own, not a government-owned house. And that hasn't proven to be a very good model in the past. It does come with issues. Now, I'm more familiar with what's been going on in the city of Ottawa because that was the big city I lived in for more than 30 years. But I would imagine the issues are the same in many communities across the country. One of the issues in Ottawa that I used to report on all the time when I was in the news business in that city was the time it took to get a unit in social housing. 7 years, not unusual. It's probably even more now, given the explosive population growth in the last 3 years. I used to remark all the time, even when I first moved to Ottawa in 1990, the wait time for a unit in social housing was 7 years, and there were 10,000 names on the wait list. And 25 years later, the wait time was 7 years, and 25,000 names, 10,000 names on the wait list. One of the issues is once people move into a unit in social housing, it's rare that they leave. There is not a lot of turnover in social housing. It doesn't become a temporary housing solution. Rather, it can take on a certain permanence. It can even become generational. Another issue is maintenance. One of our callers brought this up. Maintenance backlog. In most of the big cities, social housing now is run by a municipal housing corporation. The backlog in the city of Ottawa was $250 million to fix things like elevators that don't work, and holes in walls, and leaky roofs, and drafty windows, and busted boilers, all of these things. And these municipal housing corporations, they either don't have the resources or they just don't have the urgency to do these repairs. And then, of course, there are always questions about whether social housing or public housing can contribute to stigma or ghettoization. He lives in the projects. That sort of thing. Now, living in a deeply affordable studio apartment or a one-bedroom apartment does beat sleeping rough in the winter or in a tent in February in Canada in a public park somewhere. So there has to be some role for this in any serious housing plan. But I don't think we should pretend that it's any sort of panacea to help young couples who want a home to call their own. They want their own house. They don't want a government-owned house. I'm Rob Snow. We're back tomorrow with the Friday Free-for-All Talkback Hour. The latest breaking news is coming up next on News Radio.